Good evening, you're watching News Mongolia on MNB World, and I'm your host Solangor Chitpatar. And for our top stories, the Ministry of Health organized its regular press briefing to provide the latest updates on COVID-19. People living with disabilities are getting greater access to vocational education. Domestic violence in USA surges during virus shutdowns. For other news, stay tuned. The Ministry of Health, World Health Organization, and National Center for Communicable Diseases held its regular press briefing to provide the latest updates on COVID-19 status in Mongolia. Details are in the following report.
On April 7th, the Director of World Health Organization, Tedros Ghebreyesus, held a conference call with the ministers of health of 37 Asia-Pacific countries to exchange information on COVID-19 outbreak status. The World Health Organization continues to warn that the second wave of COVID-19 outbreak is coming to the Asian continent. The director of the National Center for Communicable Diseases reported one more case of COVID-19 was confirmed in Mongolia. On April 7th, the NCCD conducted tests on 237 people, including 25 people from district hospitals for contagion surveillance. 192 people who arrived on a specially chartered flight from Istanbul and 14 people under observation at the NCCD were tested for the second time, with the results being negative. 5 people isolated in Siling province also tested negative for COVID-19 during a second testing. However, one person was confirmed positive during his second test. That person arrived by land via the northern border on March the 26th. He was tested negative on March 28th for the test. Currently, there are 1,484 people under observation. 177 of them are under isolation at NCCD, and around 300 doctors and medical workers are working at the NCCD and other designated locations. The Ministry of Health has urgently imported the anti-flu drug, Avigan, produced in Japan, and is currently being used for the treatment of COVID-19 patients. By the 8th of April, Mongolia has 16 confirmed cases of COVID-19. 4 patients have already been discharged from the hospital after treatment and are currently under observation at Special Health and Wellness Facility. All 16 cases are imported cases. 4 of them are foreign nationals, and there is no community outbreak, as all those people were taken into isolation after their arrival into Mongolia.
Thank you for staying with us. Now let's take a look at Mongolia's current affairs.
Singapore's A-Star Research Institute developed the Fortitude 2.0 PCR test, now being used by our local hospitals and medical institutions. Temasek Foundation International donated 3,000 of the testing kits to Mongolia as humanitarian aid. The tests were handed over to Mongolian officials on April 3rd. Fortitude 2.0 is the first ready-make hospital lab diagnostic test kit to receive the Singapore Health Sciences Authority's provisional authorization for clinical use. Each kit comes complete with all the necessary reagents prepared, with the right quantities in quality-controlled tubes. The Ministry of Health of Mongolia expressed its appreciation and noted that the donated tests will contribute to further fighting a COVID-19 outbreak in Mongolia. This year marks the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Mongolia and Singapore.
On April 6th, the government of Japan announced that it would provide $235,000 in humanitarian aid to Mongolia through the International Red Cross Society in order to support the fight against a COVID-19 outbreak in Mongolia. In addition, the South Korean Ministry of Health has donated $250,000 in the latest testing kits to Mongolia. In addition, Singaporean businesses operating in Mongolia have provided 30,000 Singapore dollars in assistance for purchasing test kits for Mongolian hospitals.
During Mongolia's COVID-19 lockdown, foreign nationals holding investor visas Tourist stamps and HG work visas will be able to extend their residency permits online at evisa.mn. Once a request is processed, the applicant will receive a reply by email. More information about this service is available at evisa.mn. Foreign nationals who want to extend their residency permit must apply for an extension at least 5 days before their permit expires. If a permit has expired, an applicant will be required to go to the immigration office in person to request a renewal. Due to the current lockdown measures, no change will be made to the residency card previously used when an extension has been granted online.
This year, the Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Czech Chamber of Commerce, and the Association of the Industry and Transport Businesses will be implementing Project Propria in Mongolia. Through Project Propria, accredited Czech entities operating abroad, with the support of the Czech Embassy in the territory, provide economic diplomacy services to the Czech companies operating in the territory or those preparing to enter foreign market. Project Propria in Mongolia will be implemented by the Czech Business Support Center. The main goals of the project are to reduce risk for Czech companies operating in difficult economic environments of foreign nations, supporting their operations to increase the quality of their services, expand their operations beyond export, and turn them into investors, and to encourage Czech companies to actively participate in the nation's economy. Czech companies taking part in the Project Propria can receive professional business services and receive funding for up to 70% of their expenses related to providing services to Czech companies operating abroad, with the remaining 30% of their expenses to be co-financed by the Czech businesses benefiting from the services offered.
We have a report from our local reporter in South Gobi province. There are about 2,400 people living with disabilities in the province. One of them is Orunzot, a mechanical engineer. She works in the training department of the province vocational training center. Let's take a look at a report on how employers can support the employment of people living with disabilities by making work environments more accessible.
Orunzol doesn't have difficulty with working because her colleagues have made her work environment more accessible. This sets a good example for other organizations that are employing or planning to hire a person living with difficulties. In accordance with the labor law, Orunzol's employer allows her to work fewer hours.
There are many accessible things such as sidewalk modification for people with visual impairments and crossing walk alarm for people with hearing impairments. That's why it's even more enjoyable to go to work. Also, I need to take a break during the day. That's why they take me to a special room where I can relax. My colleagues take turns helping me.
The director of the Vocational Training Center says people with disabilities shouldn't be underestimated. They can execute tasks and work like any other employee.
Rather than pursuing social welfare allowances, it's important to focus on how to increase their social engagement or how to create employment opportunities. We have a schedule set for our 70 employees. Once every 3 months, a new person helps Orunzol get to work and return home. It makes it easier for her to come to work.
The Vocational Training Center plans to provide special training for people living with disabilities in the near future. Tufshunbayır says vocational training will help to increase their employment opportunities. The center is also calling on government agencies to improve the employment environment for people living with disabilities rather than only pursuing social welfare policies.
Now let's take a look at currency exchange rates provided by Mongol Bank. Now let's take a look at weather forecast for the world's major cities. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for staying with us. We'll see you tomorrow with more news and updates. Have a nice evening. Goodbye.